Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Relationship of the body-mind. And I just had a very powerful sitting experience again, as I've had the last few times, just feeling the concentration of energy that comes about in this room during the time when people sit. And I talked about it last week. I had that experience again today, and it was remarkable, especially since I was thinking about it in a way, because I know what our speaker is going to talk about. I have some sense of what it's going to talk about. Anyway, this is Tony Richardson. Tony is a practitioner in the Zen tradition, in the Tibetan tradition, who is a psychiatrist and has an interest and has spent some time thinking about the relationship of energy, and the body to meditation. So I'll ask, he will say more about what his interests are and what he's about. This is the second time we've had him speak, and the first time was very good. So.
I'll try to be good again. Hi. What I'd like to do, if you guys don't particularly object, is to first confess that I'm not a very good Buddhist, and I'm not well versed in things Buddhist. What happened for me was I stumbled into a relationship with a teacher, and it's that relationship which has made me a Buddhist rather than any esoteric teachings or trainings or studies that I've done. I am a psychiatrist, so I spend a lot of time doing books and stuff like that. I did read Buddhist stuff when I was younger, but what I need to say that when I spent time with my teacher and I've, over the years of knowing him, come to recognize that space. Some of the sensations of that space, some of the feelings of that space, some of the energies of that space. And have found it to be of great benefit. And the reason I think that this is of benefit to me is because I'm lousy at being the other sort of Buddhist. I have a particularly dull mind when it comes to meditating. I go to sleep. I can't pay attention. Single-pointed attention becomes multi-pointed blowout very quickly. I can't sit still for very long. I can now cross my legs, but when I first started working with him, I couldn't even do that. So I would tend to lay down to meditate, and you probably know what that means. And at the same time, he, as a recognized teacher, was teaching many of the techniques that you already know, like shunyata and meditation and stuff like that. And so in comparison, this is in Australia, in comparison to the other students who were told very dogmatic and pretty strict things that they needed to do, like one of the retreats we did, which is a closed retreat by yourself for about 3 months, requires that you do 1,100,000 of a particular mantra in a particular way and not moving off the mat, and not letting the candles go out and all that sort of stuff. Well, of course, I did the retreat and did it very badly. I was told around about the 1 million mark that I was actually doing the wrong mantra. Not good news. And meanwhile, the other folks who had done these retreats, I mean, you get together, you tell stories, and they couldn't move, and my teacher, the instructions to me were move around the room as much as possible, do things which are very opposite. Of course, this news came to me after I'd already spent the time judging myself for how bad I'd done the retreat and how I wasn't able to do it, while he was in the same house downstairs telling folks downstairs who were supporting it how well the retreat was going. And slowly I had to recognise that what I thought was going on was not what was, at least what I thought in my conscious mind and what I was saying about myself wasn't true. That something else is happening and that he's judging that and he's recognising that and he's in some way supporting that. Now I've got two choices. I can say he's crazy and I'm sane, or I can say there is something going on that I don't have access to. I am not yet able to feel directly. And when I started to do that, I started to look a little bit at what he'd been saying to me over the years. I mean, the first time he saw me or met me, he said, you know, it would be good for you to be more compassionate. And I can tell you at that time I was being as kind as I knew how. And I was seriously pissed, you know. I mean, this guy tells me that I'm donating my time, I'm seeing people in the most extreme of circumstances, I'm doing everything I know how to be the most giving I know how, and this guy's telling me I need to be more compassionate. It turns out, after a number of years, that he's talking about something different. The words he used are different than what my current experience of then was. And for me to understand that, I had to change. My insights had to change. My reference points had to change. My psychology had to change, but not just my psychology. My access to something underneath my psychology had to change. The more nature of me. And, you know, he could have told me that right up front, and I would have gone, blah, 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 blah. I'll go into therapy, I'll do it, I'll fix it. But it's actually not how it was to come about for me. How it was to come about for me was to actually sink into the relationship of him and feel what it's like to be around him. And in that process, begin to ask myself the questions. What's he talking about? What is it? You know, where am I in this? Of course, I'd ask myself the questions, become very dull and go to sleep immediately. But over a period of some years, I didn't sleep so much. I was able to ask the questions a little bit more directly. I was starting to feel the sensations of being around him. And now when I teach this stuff, that's what I teach as best I can. Introduce people to the actual experience of what it's like for the body, for us as a body, for me as a body, to be in relationship with a teacher. And not just a teacher, but when I'm in relationship to him as a teacher, I'm in relationship to his teachers and his teachers' teachers. And now that he is no longer in body, I have had occasion to meet other lamas, and lo and behold, it can feel very similar. Although they say different things and they look differently, that space, that place, can feel very similar. So, a number of us are trying to make a jargon that goes with this, or a language, so we can start to speak about it. The word spaciousness is often used as part of this. But we're also starting to feel it as a place of some, not spaciousness in terms of emptiness. It feels juicy and warm and full in its way. We're also starting to feel it as a place of possibility. And those of us who are now thinking in this arena, and Julie Henderson will be coming next time, and she has some similar stuff, some similar thinkings. Whether she'll share them with you, I don't know, but she's been one of the people that we've been talking to or with. If we're looking at possibilities, what are we looking at? And there's several different ways of playing with this. I'm a psychiatrist, so my outside interest is personality, is what patterns you and I have that we put on over ourselves in order to be in relationship to each other and in relationship to ourselves. So in this space, we're talking about something that happens before personality is made, at the generation of personality. And this goes well with, turns out, with what the Drukchen says, the Holiness of Drukchen, who is the head of the Drukta Kagus. He's a very well-rounded, English-speaking 35-year-old fellow who doesn't do a lot of the Tibetan ritual stuff, but likes to cut through in relationship to folks. And he tends to say things like, especially when you're in the middle of some sort of, but Rinpoche, I'm terrible, it's awful, I can't do it, it doesn't work very well, the world is fucked, da-da-da-da-da. And he just looks at you and he says, it's not happening. It isn't happening. Now, when I read that in a book, when I was 16 years old, I couldn't get my head around that. That's a very hard concept. Because my experience is that it is happening. As I've spent more time in the place of spaciousness and awareness, I am willing to consider that a lot of the things that I am currently generating in my personality or feel to be happening or decide is happening may not in fact be happening. Maybe there's something before the making. Maybe there's something before we generate the objection, the aversion, whatever it is we're generating. I'm not real good at that. It's a real difficult concept. I can't do it very well psychologically, and I can't do it very well with words. But I can get closer to it when I go back into that moment of relationship with my teacher. For a moment, maybe a second or half second, there's a rest between what I'm currently deciding is true and what may be underneath that. And now I begin to understand, little bit understand, what we're talking about, the internal nature of me. That is the Buddha nature of me. There is something else going on in here. I'm spending most of my time to obstruct it and shape it and use it for my own ends and decide that it's something that if I can really get a hold of it, then I will be a much better something. But, that's just sort of what I'm doing with it on the top. Underneath there's something else going on, and I'm beginning to be able, too grandiose a statement, but maybe I get closer to looking at it. And that's been what's happened in my relationship with my teachers. Now, as a body worker, the next thing that came up was, this wasn't such an easy process. It certainly wasn't easy on the body. Because the body I made is the body that's really intent on getting what it wants. And also, not only that, knows what it wants and knows what it needs. Now, I made this body a long time before I knew what was going to be my history and what was going to happen in this lifetime. Yet I already have these attitudes inside my body. If you don't love me, well, fuck off. Hey, I don't need you. I'm fine. Or what can I do to get you to love me? Whatever of that, though, my body is currently holding. I have all those things inside my body, with it, the belief of the body that it will be able to, me as body, will be able to get to some place which will feel as though I'm okay. More than okay. Very okay. There is nothing in this body that recognises that I'm actually in the process of becoming less as I get older. I'm actually in the process of losing some of those abilities and some of those energies. Your body not wanting to recognise that. And so the story of the body is the story of suffering. And the story of the body is the story of ego. It's the story of the I. And it's inevitable that I am going to suffer, for I will be disappointed. I will not become whatever this body really promised itself to be. And that becomes more obvious as I get older. And that I'm willing to even know that is only possible for me, really, because I recognise that that's not what it's about. Right? If I didn't recognise that, all this would be a shock to me, and I'd have to do something to hide it or move away from myself or do something about it. But a little bit, and I'm not saying I'm not doing that. Believe me, I'm doing as much hiding as I can, and I'm doing all the tricks that I know how to do psychologically. And I'm sort of talking about it. But there are moments with my teacher and away from my teacher when I can begin to recognise the patterns, which are simply patterns. They are simply my psychological patterns. And I can notice that I'm doing that from some place that's a little easier, a little warmer, a little fuller. And as it slowly turns out, has more meaning for me. And in that place, I find my teacher over and over again. And again, I think the reason I find my teacher is because I didn't know another way to do it. I couldn't do it through any of the other ways that are classically taught. I was dumb in those ways. I didn't have the skills for that. I didn't make a body that could allow me to meditate. I had to have another person there. So I had another person there for a while. He's not there anymore as a person, but still the space still remains. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is, well, I started to talk about, but I moved away from, because this occasion changes in the body. And the changes in the body as a body worker became very interesting to me, because then we started to wonder if we could start practicing those changes, would we be doing the same sort of practice as you might do when you meditate? And so we started to do the things that supported the changes that were in the body, that were happening in the body anyway. And the interesting thing, well, amazing thing or whatever, was that the Tibetan teachers would then come back to us and say, yes, that's right. And then they would start to talk to us about yogas and tantras and exercises and stuff like that. Now, we just would spontaneously find them in English, in our own psychological ways, our own bodywork ways, and then check them out with the teachers, or me with my teacher. And my teacher would come back and say, yeah, well, there's a whole philosophy that supports that. There's a whole teaching that supports that. This would be Hatha Yoga, this would be Ana Yoga, this would be, something that I knew nothing about. And then he would describe how it would move the humours and change the phlegm and the lung and all that sort of stuff. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but at least I knew that it fitted in somewhere. So now we've started to practice those things, look at those things of practice. And I need to say very clearly that these are not necessarily a better way of doing practice, or they come out of our experience of what we needed to do for us, this group, looking at us. It's not necessarily a better way to do it. It's just another aid. Most of it, as far as we know, is supported out of the Tibetan stuff. Certainly my teacher has supported most of what we've done, at least before he died. And if you're willing, I'd like to run you through some of these exercises. And while we're doing that, I will try and find the best relationship with my teacher I can until in some way the room is touched by it. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. We've done no harm. Okay? Anyone particularly objecting to that scenario? Okay. All right. Let me say the first time my teacher taught me this, he taught it to me in metaphor. I went to him, as one does, saying, I'm the worst student in the world. Why don't you give me stuff to do? And how come everybody else gets to do really high-powered and I don't get to do nothing? And the discussion deteriorated into a discussion about how you would go about consecrating a statue of Buddha. And he described to me how you would get a piece of sandalwood and you would make that into the backbone of the Buddha. And then you would write very sacred mantras and you would wrap them around, layer upon layer upon layer, around the spine. until the spine was held by the essence of the esoteric teachings and the forces that hold the spine. And then when you had done that, you would pack the whole of the cavity of the body with really rich sandalwood, placing within it precious and semi-precious jewels. So I went out there thinking, what a fool I had to even bring all this to him. And about 4 days later, I realised what he was doing was a trance induction in which he was talking about the actual body itself. So we're going to prepare our bodies as though they were Buddha. That's the first deal. And in order to do that, I suggest you notice that you have a butt, and you find where your butt is in relationship to whatever you're sitting on. And if we assume that the butt is the bowl that holds us, then the only thing we need to do is to arrange our spines so that we have something that arises out of that bowl. Now I'm going to make some statements which may or may not be true, but they fit this metaphor, so we're going to play with them for a while. We're going to imagine that the bowl is where most of us at home sit, where we come when we are the most relaxed. You're going to imagine that the spine is the place where we can be ourselves. And if they are in right relationship, if they are in relationship with each other, then being who you are is somewhat taken care of. Just imagine that, and just let yourself move back into your spine and down into your pelvis until you can feel your breath or your energy or your awareness touch down to where your butt is. You can include your arsehole. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to have part of, and for those of you who have good control, you can allow your arseholes in your breath to come down towards the floor and then reach up again when you change your breath pattern, as though you were kissing. Do that as best you can, but don't get too obsessive about it, as we tend to do. Now I'm going to suggest that if we are a bowl, that we arise from the bowl in many different ways. Where we rise as a fountain through the centre and open ourselves up and go over our kidneys and then go over our hearts and into our chests and all the way up into our mouths and then all the way up into our eyes and up into our heads. So it's a sort of fountain arrangement. And I'm going to say that we actually do that in 3 dimensions. We don't just do it sideways, we do it front to back. And in some way, that movement of who we are, that energy of who we are, is washing over the sides of us and moving up through the centre of us. Body workers say that if you're really frightened, then what you do is constrict this fountain so that most of the movement's up the centre and not so much movement is down the side. And that when you are most relaxed, the movement up is about equal to the movement down. But since we're not there yet, or very few of us are at any one time, we're going to do some practice to let the movement down be as easy as the movement up. The movement up is automatic. It's just part of being alive. The movement down, or the relaxation phase, or the coming back home phase, as Circle Rinpoche calls it in his book on death and dying, is something that we're not quite so good at. And there's a couple of major catch points in the body. There are these horizontal diaphragms that run across the body, which catch us. And these are these horizontal planes that we have, we put them in and we activate them depending on what we think is important as a psychological being. And we're going to practice releasing some of them. There's one underneath the brain called the tentorium. And when we're stressed, we tend to make the tentorium straight across like this. When we're relaxed, the inner part of the tentorium starts to drop down a little and becomes a funnel. And that's around the spinal cord, at the top of the spinal cord, so that the energy tends to drain over our brains and back down and around and down. And if you would think about the possibility, approach the reality of relaxing your tentorium, even though you've never met it before and probably don't know that much about it, if you were just to imagine that to happen, sometimes it just follows. And if that draining sensation happens, it may also have the same vertical holding underneath your tongue. Turns out that right speech involves relaxation of the tongue. Just an aside. So if you were to let the tongue and the base of the tongue relax, the bone underneath the tongue, the hyoid bone that's here, if you would let those dip down in the same way, then the energy will move down. Into your voice box or through your voice box, which you may also relax by, again, just tipping the internal pieces so they open a little. There's lots of different other places where you can have these vertical holdings. The major next one, there's normally one across the heart, which is the one that human beings put in when they don't like being humiliated. But we won't even talk about that because no one here has that problem. We go straight down into where the phrenic diaphragm is, which is the thing underneath the lungs. And again, it's two round things. And if the round things flatten down a little, then what happens is you get a movement on both the outside of the round thing and the inside of the round things, and things just spill over, all the energy can just spill over. And coat the inside of your gut in here. And when you coat the inside of your gut, what happens is you come back to home again. All right. There's a change in the energy of the room. Right. Just be aware of the change of the internal and external energies. And consider that to be okay. Now, while you're sitting there, I want to suggest something to you that my teacher once suggested to me. I was talking to him about cause and effect and karma, such like. And he said, you guys don't get it. You don't get this karma stuff. You think, or you seem to think, it's about if you're bad, you're going to be punished. And he says, too small view, too small. The forces of karma is a large golden river that carries you inexorably into the ocean. And within that golden river, you will pay attention to particular things. But the river is very large. You will pay attention to a rock, you will pay attention to a rapid. But the river is much larger than that and is inexorable and is primarily positive from your viewpoint. And yet you see it and measure it as a negative phenomenon. You are doing that because that's where you look. That is where you look. I want you to come back again to that sense of silence and quiet that you had when you came back down into your pelvis, before I disturbed it with such things as talking and thinking and stuff. I want you to come back into that with the idea that there's something that carries us, that is actually moving us towards the ocean. And that's the largest force that's going on. There are lots of other forces. There's lots of things to be concerned about. There's lots of things to get hooked about. But the actual largest force is the one that moves us towards the ocean. Now I want you to imagine that there are both embodied and unembodied beings who are really interested in helping us do this. And the thing about the beings who are helping us, they know that we are going to pay attention to the difficulty. That we are going to pay attention to what's hard and what's a problem, and how incomplete we are and how imperfect we are. And I want you to imagine that those forces that are positive actually smile in recognition of how convoluted and difficult we make ourselves to be. They are really accepting of that. And in being accepting of that, I would like you to feel touched by that acceptance. For that's the essence of my relationship with my teacher. It's the experience of being touched by his smile as I convince myself of my imperfections. And when I feel that smile, I notice that he doesn't notice the same things about me as I do. He's not looking at the same places I'm looking. He's not concerned at the same places I'm concerned. He's not jumping on my case because I'm not the same as him. Or that I don't know everything. Well, welcome to Josei Rinpoche, those of you who met him or any other teacher that was part of that. And may what we do here be of some benefit to as many folks as it can be.
Would you like to have some reactions?
Sure. Please.
I always have something to say. Talk about teacher and the relationship to the teacher, and I'm talking a little bit about our resentment to surrender to the human being and their teaching. At the same time, the moment you start to tell what to do, I'm so rigid, I want everything right. So I say, I didn't hear this word, what did he say? And at the same time, you said your teacher passed away, and now you're looking for perhaps other people to carry you on. And there might now establish a conflict between your first teacher saying, and now your second one, your third one, and so on. And I'd like to respond to that conflict. I sometimes deal with myself. And the reason I'm saying is because a lot of us come from different religious background. And when we go into Buddhism, there's a conflict going on there too. So I'd like to respond to that, please.
Sure.
Well, it is very clear that I got into relationship to my teacher because I was hot for him. He was the right shape. He had the right smile. Had great legs. And you know, if I didn't have felt some sexual charge towards him, I had a teacher before then who was ugly. And who, by the way, now is pretty, but before he was ugly. I don't know how that happens. And you know, I was really racked with that sense of he was stern and difficult for me, and I thought I was supposed to have a teacher and I couldn't, and those sorts of difficulties. You know, when I got hot for Rinpoche, I'm a lot easier with stuff. I don't hook myself so much into argument when I'm feeling like, well, there's a chance here, you know, maybe we're going to. And that smoothed things away a lot. And since he told me just before he died, he had me do a practice in which one of the major chants is all Lama is the same. And two things, all Lama is the same, and all the force of Lama, to plead to all the force of Lama to keep me in mind, to remember me. And after a long time of doing that, what I noticed is that now with the new teachers that I'm in contact with, who I knew before, but we're a little bit closer, I find them a lot more difficult personally, at the personal level. They're much more harsh on me. Their personalities is different. But I find that as much as difficulty as I walk out of there saying, oh, shit, bastard, crap, yeah. But in fact, now that I recognise what happened between Josei Rinpoche and I, underneath the personality issue, I can feel it happening with those teachers as well. So I often have the problem of going to one of those teachers knowing that I'm going to be unhappy with the relationship at my personality level, but often having rather dramatic underneath things happening in that process. And I struggle with myself. I mean, going to see Josei Rinpoche was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. I could smell him and feel him and taste him and imagine him and have fantasies going to bed with him and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I could entertain myself for a long time at the psychological level with being around him. And he loved it. He would get semi-dressed or turn over and shake his ass at me or, whatever it did to keep this moving, In fact, he stayed with me for a while in my house in San Francisco, and I have this Victorian house. It's all very Victorian and pretty and stuff like that. And hanging from the chandelier is a corkscrew with of a person with a dick, is the corkscrew, which he put up there. And he used to spin every time we were in the room together. He'd just spin it and just look at me, It was very clear. And, it was very clear that those juices were involved. But that involvement stuck me there for the other stuff, And now, when I go to the other teachers, I get the other stuff. I don't have quite that much involvement with them. One, a little, the new one's a little hot, maybe. We'll see. But, and I know all those sensations. I know those sensations of, Jesus, he was such an asshole, and I was so bad, and I should have, and he should have, and we should have, and all that sort of stuff. Lots and lots of that. Yeah. His Holiness the Drukchen, who I hadn't seen for years, called me from the St. Francis Hotel a month ago and said, I'm here, I'm about to catch a plane somewhere, come down and see me. So, I had 30 minutes with him, and you can't. I couldn't say no. I mean, gee, excuse me. I'm busy right now. I don't want to come and see you, O Great Holy One. No, I wasn't going to do that. But I did make sure that I didn't get there exactly on time, and I did a little bit of that, and did lose him for a while. But we had a half an hour together in which he, and I had a couple of months of work to do out of that. So I don't actually go looking for them very much, but the circumstance is such that I'm part of the culture, and I'm part of that community now, and they know me because we all got introduced, and I find myself with my friends bumping into them, sort of, not exactly, but like that.
When you were talking about the erect spine, the energy flowing over the head, my immediate reduction in visualization was cock and balls as a Buddha, and here's the Buddha sitting erect with the kind of lips of the glands, and sort of beard or jowls, and out of the peace slip, this energy flowing down over the body, and to see the arms of the Buddha crossed across like a vein that runs down the shaft of the penis, and even the balls, like a robe, the textures of this robe just flowing down. And immediately I thought, my God, I've got to get an arms painted for me. But my reflection, of course, is that's the way I'm treated by cock and men's cocks many, many times as something to worship. And I've never before visualized it this way, but it's I'm over. So when he talks about the pre-trans fallacy and things like that, it's easy for me to see that the worship of phallus, the worship of cock in my life would certainly be a substitute. But what I really want is enlightenment, liberation, and transcendence, and it certainly provides a glimpse of that. There's no doubt about that. Very interesting.
Yeah. I speak for my teacher unwisely, I'm sure, when I say my experience of him at least is I can't see you in the way that he would see you. But in my current place where I would be, we would include that as the ability to be able to worship is a major good thing to be able to do. And so, and if cock is Buddha, he's no problem. Absolutely no problem. So, because,
Vindication. Buddha.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed the part of your talk in a sense, because I resonate a great deal to it, because I mentioned I've tried to do Jukai 4 times and I can't do it. I stop, too much. It's just, but I do have a teacher. She's female, so I still like her.
That's nice of you.
And I always go to confess.
Yeah.
And since last time I saw her, that I was going to do Jukai with her. and she was I was going to be her very first person she ever gave. And I told her I just not doing it. She said, "Oh, wonderful." So I couldn't.
Yeah, right.
And she's a yoga teacher too, and she's very interested in the body. And I want to find out who this we is that you're talking about. We, not that you, but so who would seem to be doing this that you're talking about?
The we thing. I teach in Australia. I'm in Australia half the time and here half the time. In Australia I teach, and I've been classically teaching bodywork, and the sort of bodywork that we've been teaching inevitably leads to a good number of the students looking at spiritual issues. And so a number of the students over the years have gotten together, and a number of the teachers have gotten together from different perspectives, but mostly because José Rinpoche's presence was so strong in Sydney, a fair amount of Tibetan influence. And since he's been dead, we've been looking at what has happened to us in relationship to him. And if we were going to include that as part of teaching folks how to help folks, what are we going to teach them? We don't feel competent as Buddhist teachers, especially not at the Geshe level or the PhD level or the informational level. But we do feel as though we've been through a process of our own, which has sufficient similarities to it that may be of use to other people. So Julie Henderson's one of that group. Robin Spire, who's in Australia. There's maybe 8 of us that have been experimenting with this or using this as best we can out of our own experience.
In terms of the body work, and when your teacher went back and gave you the references within the Tibetan Sutra Tantra lineage, do you still use those? Do you teach those along with body work?
I was never confident at them. But I mean, he didn't actually give me the references. He obscured the references. It was very clear that there were, again, a number of us, and so what we would do is listen to him like hawks as best we could for one little, nugget of something, so that we could go and learn about it, which is what we would tend to do. And he would always give us something that we could never find. We could never find it. I mean, and he would say things like, "Oh no, you don't spell it like this, you spell it like that," and there'd be no such word in Sanskrit, or there'd be no such word in, like impossible. So in the end, we just had to give up and say, "Okay, that's not the way we're going to do this."
You said that the techniques that you've evolved for yourself comes from the body you've made.
Yes.
Does that explain all the various schools, Zen and even Christianity and things, that people sort of born with a spiritual somatotype that works for you, that won't work for them, but still they get it, helps them draw closer to them?
Well, I can't answer the question because I'm not smart enough, to be able to hold all that information, to be able to get that sort of overview is way beyond where I'm going to have in the near foreseeable future. So I can't answer the question. So since that question drives me crazy in me, because I'm asking it too, where does it all fit, all that sort of stuff. What I've gone to do is to go back to the basic as I can get. And as basic as I can get is the actual forces are positive. These techniques that are made are really an attempt to help us. And different combinations of technique help different people in different ways. The same as everybody is, if you look in Chinese medicine, everyone's a sort of combination of the 3 major types. Or if you look in psychiatry, nobody's a pure something, Everyone's got these combinations. So what we try to do until we're getting a little bit better at at being able to say generally what helps some people more than others, like physical types and stuff. But we certainly don't have anything like the view that my teacher had. I was continually amazed at who he chose to work with, where he chose to work with, and what he chose to do, compared to what I would do, say, as a psychiatrist, or, you know. And he would show me that. He would have me sit beside him, and he would show me where my choice would go and where his choice would go, and I would be utterly amazed. I couldn't see it at all. Now, I see it a little bit better, but I still don't see it very well. But we are beginning to get some idea out of it. But more importantly, we're just throwing it out there, and you see what hooks. Grab what you can, because, you know, we're not smart enough to say this is the right way for anybody yet. And so then people come back and say, well, this worked for me. And so then we work, well, okay, let's develop this. Let's do this bit. Let's do this breath technique. Let's do this body technique. Let's do this meditation technique. Now, part of that is the recognisation that people are that human beings are different than each other. That there is something the same, but there is something quite different. And my experience is that's one of the hardest things for us to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.